They Say What They Can't Radio.
Welcome to SoulShare, a conversation focused on love, intimacy, vulnerability, and emotional intelligence. This is a different kind of relationship dialogue for those who want to make the shift from the ego-driven to more intimate, spirit-nurturing partnerships that satisfy. Because that's what Black love is. Black love is powerful. Black love is soulful. Black love is a love that you can feel. Give thanks. Greetings. This is Sesheta Khepra, the intimacy junkie, and welcome to SoulShare. So today I have a new co-host, so we're going to introduce you first. Tell us who you are.
My name is Sigmund. I'm also known as Scorpion, by people who know me a little more intimately, and also people who may have seen me perform.
All right. Wait, what kind of performance you just do?
Well, I used to be a dancehall artist at one point, and I'm also a DJ.
All right. And?
Hi, I'm Anjy Dyer-Munroe.
All right. So today we have a very special episode. We're discussing a very important topic. It's revolving around the Exonerated Five. We're not calling them the Central Park Five anymore. We're changing, the narrative.
Of course.
So, it's now the Exonerated Five. And in regards to the Netflix series, When They See Us by Ava DuVernay. And did you get a chance to watch that?
Yes, it was a painful watch, but I got a chance to watch it.
Okay, please tell us about what that was like for you as a Black male, and also living in New York. Did you have a experience, or were you familiar with the case when it first happened in 1989?
Okay, I was vaguely familiar with it only because I wasn't living here at the time. So I came right in between the actual occurrence, the event, and the trial, because I came here in January of 1990. Now, my experience with regards to the whole climate is a little different probably than the average person, but I came from a country where, Black people rule, you have lots of freedom, you could go any and everywhere, and no problem, and I remember within the first week of coming here, it was cold outside, but I took up a basketball and I wanted to go up a couple of blocks from where I live to go play ball. I live in a Flatbush area. I still live there all these years later. So I was walking distance from Vanderveer Projects, so I saw the courts one day, coming home from the subway with my mom. So I thought, okay, someplace I could go and play some basketball. I was a basketball junkie that time. So I take up the ball, I get dressed, and my mom asks me, where you going? So I'm like, I'm going by the basketball courts up the street. And she's like, under no circumstances are you going there. So I was like, inside of me, I was like, almost feeling rebellious, like I'm going to find a way to go anywhere, anyway, but I had to try to figure out what's going on. And being that I come from a culture where it's, it's taboo to question your parents, it was kind of hard, but at the same time, I found a way to dig into what's going on. Why I can't go 5 blocks from here and play basketball? There's a lot of courts, so it's not like I'm going to be affecting anybody, bothering anybody, and I'm going to play. I'm doing something active, And she proceeded to explain that, it's not really safe for young boys, your complexion, and your age in New York City.
How old were you in
I was
April
exactly 15.
In 89.
Just turned 15.
The same age, yeah.
So I was the same age as some of these boys, So she proceeded to explain that, it's not safe, and she doesn't want me going out there by myself. If I'm going to anyone's house, she has to speak to their parents. She has to know what time I'm going to get there, or what time I'm planning to be there, what time I'm planning to leave. It required a whole lot of coordination.
Right.
And this was foreign to me. So it really blew my mind. Now, once I got enrolled in school, I was hearing the conversations.
Right.
So now I became aware. So I even heard, even at that time, people were still talking about Yusuf Hawkins, in school.
Well, the Yusuf Hawkins actually it happened within the same year, but Yusuf Hawkins didn't happen until August
Right.
of '89. So this actually took place before Yusuf Hawkins. So it was like, even though like 1989, that was such a very woosah year, but
yes.
people were talking the Howard Beach incident with Michael Griffin, and when he got chased, that happened in '86, and I remember what that was like, because that happened like I was in junior high school, and I just remember at one point the young boys just running through the hallways because they were so outraged and so angry, just tearing things off the wall, screaming Howard Beach, and just through the hallways of the junior high school, because they were just so angry at at what was going on. But Yusuf Hawkins didn't take place, I think, until August, and that was in Bensonhurst. But even with all of that, it was just like during that '80s, it was just
Another
so
one of the things.
yeah, it
Well,
was just so much
here's a
going on.
funny
When
thing.
the trials, by the time the trials started, and that's probably when you're talking about by the time the trial started for the Exonerated Five, that by that time Yusuf Hawkins had already happened. So all of that,
But so here's the other thing that makes this so very surreal. I had a friend, from my country who lived in Bensonhurst. And I used to go hang out in Bensonhurst. And my mom was like terrified at this idea that I was hanging out in Bensonhurst.
Yeah.
Because, it was a bunch of us, but nevertheless, because of her worry, now I was like hypersensitive, like when I'm walking, going towards the building, because his father was a supervisor of the building, and it was a considerable amount of us, but nevertheless, we're grossly outnumbered, in that neighborhood. And I'm hearing the stories, and, so it had me on edge, even though I was going to a friend and, I felt safe around them and, we had fun and all of that. But I was always on edge going there, nevertheless. Even traveling on the bus going there. You're seeing, black people riding the bus to whatever stop they're going. But nevertheless, it's like, okay, I'm about to get off in this area where,
this incident took place, and it affected everybody, because, as I said, the climate during that time, and I don't want to even get my timelines confused, but then there was the Bernhard Goetz incident, and I don't remember exactly what year that took place, but there was so much things, going on.
The vigilantes.
Yes, there was so much going on, and the city was just, really, on edge. And but what I want to know is, like, with that time, did you have a curfew?
Oh,
you had
absolutely.
to be on. Did you have to be in by the time
I don't think I knew any young black male I was in school with that didn't have a curfew. That would be an anomaly, because if anyone said they didn't have a curfew, it's like, well, how come you don't have a curfew?
I actually thought that today, thinking about going back and thinking about the case. I'm like, why were they there? But that's the worst thing. They should be comfortable being there.
Oh yeah.
But see, and that was one of the things that was, as I was watching it, and and I was taking my notes, and I was just like, this was a school night. And then I went and I looked at the calendar. This was a Wednesday night. This was a school night. And it's like, why were they there? And then, I said, at first I said, let me see if this was during spring break.
It's our conditioning.
Let me see if they, because I wanted to do my research. You know what I mean? Because even though I lived it and I'm the same age, the exact same age as them, you know what I mean? It's like certain things is still very spotty.
Of course.
And I said, I wanted to, see. I was like, okay, well, this was a Wednesday night. It fell on a Wednesday, and I don't think this was during Easter break, because Easter that year fell in March. So I'm looking through, all of this stuff, and I'm just like, okay, so why were they out? But the whole wilding
concept, and we
Right.
all know that. And I know boys who went out wilding and doing that kind of stuff. And I grew up in East New York, so we didn't have Central Park. In our neighborhood, we had Highland Park. So in Highland Park, and you see the boys, and you know, as a girl, when we come out and play, we just right there in front of our doors, and we not going further than the doors. And you see the boys, and you see them building up, and and going congregating, and then you see them moving in that pack. Some of them, sometimes they have bats, sometimes they have sticks, sometimes they have balls, and they have all of this, and they're going towards the park. I have male cousins. I grew up with male cousins that's only a couple of years old, so I know what wilding looks like. You know what I mean? So, and that that was a real thing. However, the media took that, they changed what it actually was,
Of course.
and they put that hard D on it and the hard ing, wilding, because now they're making it seem like, okay, they're animals. Now we know wilding was just a bunch of kids being bored and getting into mischief because they had nothing to do. The programs, there was no programs, and they just went to the park to just do regular mischievous stuff that boys do. But then the media got hold of the word, and they made it into a criminal thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you think about the media's manipulation? So were you familiar with the term wilding at that?
By the time I got here, it was still heavily in use.
Okay, and what did that consist of for you?
Wilding out, that kind of stuff. It was just like you expressed, boys being boys, mischievous kind of, It wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't anything criminal as far as what I was involved in or around, because I was around a lot of young boys my age.
Just butting heads.
I mean,
Butting heads.
Yeah, I remember there was one instance where we were coming down North Strand Avenue, and it started off like about 4 or 5 of us. And by the time, we started, in Crown Heights, and we were walking, just walking. And by the time we ended up into the Flatbush section, Cross Church Avenue, it was like about 30 something of us. I didn't know half of the people, but it was just a big group of us. And lo and behold, at some point, police stopped all of us, had all of us flat against a wall, frisked every last one of us, wanted ID because some of us looked older than 14, 15, 16, So, it was weird because for me, where I grew up again,
So what is it about that thing that makes young boys see a bunch of random other boys and say, let me just join this group of random other, because I'll have to admit, even though I lived through the case as, like I said, as the same age as those boys, and even seeing the Ken Burns documentary, the Central Park 5, it wasn't really until this show that I was just like, wait a minute. These boys didn't even know each other. I was, and I want to say this. I think a lot of people, when you see the social media conversations, are being very disingenuous, and they don't want to admit, and it's like they're not honest about their recollections of what actually took place, because everybody acts like they knew from the beginning that these boys was innocent. We all didn't know that they were innocent because all we had was the media information and what they put, and that's the information that we were fed.
At that time, we were savvy enough to be aware that we were being manipulated.
Right, exactly. Now we're a bit more savvy.
I think the adults watching, they were the ones that were suspicious. Like, nah, this don't make sense.
I don't even think the adults knew. I think I think a lot of adults also believe that these boys were guilty. And I don't think that that's, you know what I mean? And I don't necessarily think that, there's anything wrong with, they had,
the adults felt like you did.
Right.
It's past curfew. They shouldn't have been out that late.
Not only that, but they only,
that's one concept. You're right.
Unless they were from that Harlem community and knew the boys, all they're going to know is what the media fed them.
True.
And when the media is feeding them these taped confessions. So you're just like, oh, well, these boys
Yeah,
admitted to it. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So
yeah.
there it is. It's like now all of a sudden everything is coming out. You know, when they became exonerated, everybody's acting like they knew that from the beginning, and we didn't know that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like now, you know, we're at this place now where it's like, okay, all these boys, they're joining these random, you know, this random group of people, and it's just like finding out that they did not know each other.
Yeah.
That was just like a major wow moment.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing them, you know, they're using it against them, and they're just like, who's that? Who's that? You know, saying that, oh, this one said that they saw you, and it's like, and they had no idea. Another question that I want to ask is, how did you feel when you saw that those black cops, because they had 2 black cops in
Yes.
episode 1,
Yes.
that, you know, that had the opportunity to defend and step in and fight for those boys, and they didn't do that.
Yeah.
The first one was I guess he kind of judged Raymond Santana's father, you know, because he was more concerned about work, and he was just like, well, this is more important, and he had no level of empathy for what it's like, you know, for that parent to be put in that position where it's, you know, where they feel under pressure to be at work. And then it was the second black cop who told them that I think it was Kevin Richardson's mother had you know, had to leave because Kevin Richardson's mother wasn't a well woman.
Right.
And she wasn't feeling well, and she had to leave, and the detectives was just like, oh, is it snowing? Because it must be Christmas. You know, and it was like at that point they didn't step in and say, well, the parents are going, you can't do this.
Well,
you know,
didn't the second one, when they initially tried to take him, he was like, no, not this one. I can't remember the exactly what he said, but initially he told them, no, not this one. And then, you know, they disregarded him and took him anyway. And, you know, so for him, I kind of feel like he was powerless in the situation. He didn't really have much room to be able to do anything. He tried his initial effort and it didn't work. And that was the extent of what he either was willing to try or thought he could try.
well, I guess you're a little bit more forgiving, because I have to admit I do have a bias, and I have a thing with black cops and black correction officers, and I know I have work to
Oreo
do.
cookie thing.
You know, no, it's not that. It's like they protect the status quo, you know, of the system with, and I find them to be very, and you know, even when watching the Khalif Browder documentary, and it's just like, why are these black COs doing what they're doing? These black
They
cops,
oath,
and
they oath, and they
you know,
code of
and why are
honor,
they
and they-
protecting, you know, the code, what is it, the blue code of silence,
I
as
tend to look at
opposed
it as
to
a fraternity.
Yeah, exactly.
as opposed to, you know, they have the front line, and they bear witness to the other black men and even black women that are being wrongfully accused.
Oh, yeah,
And
absolutely.
but yet and still you see your own brother and your own as criminal and you're not protecting them. In, you know, in episode 4, where with Corey Wise, you see that there's the white CO that actually looks out for him
Yes.
and actually protects him. And it's just like, why aren't our black COs? And you know, but and like I said, I'm comparing this to
Right.
the Khalif Browder
Right,
thing, and
right.
I'm just like, why aren't we
Right.
doing that for each other? You know what I mean? And it's just like, and it was very, very painful, and to see that, you know, there was no black cops that stopped this, just stopped it, and they didn't jump in and, you know, and stand up, you know, to the system. And and even now with all of this that's going on in the world now, and I'm like, why aren't black cops more vocal about what's happening to these unarmed black men that's being gunned down. And why aren't they working within the system to, to break that down and to
Their
I-
livelihood, they don't
I
have a
think
job
they've
once
been
they
in-
start doing that.
and that's the thing. Everybody's scared, which goes back to Raymond
Complacent.
Santana's father and even
Complacency.
Antron, McCrae's father, where they were, was, oh, well, we'll make sure you get to your shift. And they use that to,
Right.
to actually get to them. It's just like, okay, well, have them tell us what we need to hear, and then everybody can get home, everybody can get to work, and this is what they play on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was just like that level of fear that that we all have, and that anxiety that we have, working, for other people,
Right.
that we are, and I felt like Antron McCrae's father sacrificed his son. And as a father, tell us what that was like watching Antron McCrae and going through that.
That was so difficult for me,
yeah.
because as a father, honestly, I would rather die than watch my children get into a situation where I know they can't get out of and help them get into it, And, I think with him, it was a combination of ignorance, fear, and cowardice.
Oh, definitely.
And the reason why I say cowardice,
I agree with the cowardice. I don't
because-
agree with the ignorance, because he had his own criminal
Ignorance is
past.
a big-
He had his own criminal past, so he was familiar with the system. So,
well,
but go ahead,
okay.
finish.
Here's
I agree
why
with the
I would say
cowardice, though.
ignorance, because depending on what his situation and circumstance was, he may not have gone through what those boys were being put through. Because for instance, if whatever he was involved in, he was caught and he said, "All right, you got me," admitted to it and whatever, then he wouldn't have had to go through the interrogation and the deprivation from food and, being able to use a bathroom and the hours and hours of questioning and the back and forth badgering. I've had my own experience with that, and thankfully I haven't had to go through anything as drastic as these boys went through, but you almost feel like you're in a schizophrenic situation,
Yeah.
because you have one talking to you really nice, the good cop, bad cop garbage. So one is talking to you really nice and, trying to act like he's your friend. And the other one is badgering you and making you feel like at any moment he'll bash your head in.
Right.
So you have been arrested
Yes, I have.
and you've been questioned.
Yes.
Please tell us what, because one of the if you don't mind sharing, because
Not at all.
because I think that's another thing. I think there are a lot of black men who've had that, but they don't talk about what their experiences are. So because they're not sharing that, people don't know what it's really and truly like, and they don't know. So let's say you have that single mother who doesn't know how to protect her son or how to advise her son when this stuff happens, because black men aren't sharing what the real life experience was when they got arrested, and our brothers are going through that. So if you don't mind, can you please share what that experience was like for you?
Well, I'll tell you this, Now, the circumstances, it happened at a place I worked. I wasn't involved in anything, but it just happened to happen where I worked. I'm the only personnel belonging to the business that's there, So they come in, they ask a bunch of questions. I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. I have no clue. Within a short span of time, I'm being arrested, put in the back of a car. So now I'm in the station and they're badgering me for information that I don't
We got to
have.
take you in for more questions.
And it's constant. It's repeated. It's constant.
That's the cool.
The DA knows I'm not involved in this. But nevertheless, they're pushing. Okay, so then I get charged.
How old are you at this point?
At this point, I was 19.
Oh,
at this
19,
point.
okay.
So this is, beyond, those, that age range where those guys were. But nevertheless,
But you're still young. You're
I've
still
never
young.
experienced this.
Yeah, 19
So this is
still
a
young.
new experience to me.
Right.
And
Actually, it was that.
and I
Actually,
felt
it was
like,
that.
in this situation, when it initially happened, because it was, two guys did something and they ran into the store that I worked. Now, the store didn't have a back door, so they ran in and locked themselves in there. So in my head, I'm like, well, the police are going to get them anyway. So, I don't need to worry about anything. And when they're asking me questions, I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
And for me, I felt like, okay, well, once you got them, that would be enough and I would be cool. I would be fine. Maybe you would want my name and whatever, just in case you want to ask me some questions later. I was not of the impression at all that I would end up being arrested. So now I get arrested and they're badgering me because they want me to say that I know these guys. And they're forcing this line of, this
They want to include. They want to. They coercion. They want to include you.
Me included in it.
Right.
And they're
coercing you.
They're going. It was hours. It was long. It was a long time. And then, because, at this point, I'm babbling, I'm nervous, I'm scared. It's all kinds of emotions going on,
Right.
because I've never had this experience before.
You know how much
You
that
know?
seed is worth
So,
to fill their quota? You know
Listen,
how much that seed in jail is
when I
worth?
watched
That
the
bed?
interrogation of these kids, I could relate
Right.
because I experienced that. And then the DA comes in and he talks to you all nice, and they're asking you to write your statement and whatever, and then they bring me up on charges. And guess what? Because I was young and naive and didn't understand the system, I didn't even know what they charged me with.
Wow.
I only found out what they charged me with a decade later. And the reason I found out that, because I had to get a letter of disposition, from the case. And when I saw it, I was like, wait, is this a mistake? And the person told me, no, I was indicted on a gun charge. But I didn't have a gun.
Oh wow!
I never
You
touched
see
a
that?
gun.
You see, and you know what? And that reminds me with the Oprah interview where Antron McCray said, "Y'all know more about my case than I do. All I know is I didn't do it." And he's like, "Y'all have more information about it." And this is 30 years later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you say that it hits. You know what I mean? And it's
this is why sometimes I get into conversations with people, and when I hear people accepting and swallowing what they're being fed through the media, it infuriates me because it's like, come on, open your eyes. This is garbage that they're feeding you. This is a narrative that they want you to buy into, but this is not real.
Right,
And then you
right.
have a justice system or an injustice system as it relates to black people that forces young black men to plead guilty to things that they're not guilty of in order to avoid jail.
right.
But then you end up with a
Charge.
record.
This is a rape charge.
So like in my situation, I was being pressured to accept this plea deal because, well, if you don't accept this plea, you could end up doing time. If you
Right.
and
Yes.
they punish you
Yeah.
for not accepting their deal
Right.
because how dare you waste the court's time and go through a trial and be found guilty. So now if you're found guilty, they want to double and triple what was initially being offered to you. But why is that? And that's only unique to us.
And the thing about it is we need to empower because a lot of them take those plea deals because they get fed, okay, well, if you admit that you're guilty, then we'll only give you this amount of time as opposed if you go to trial and get found guilty. So they just take it out. But we need to empower so that they're not that afraid and they can stand up and say to themselves and give them the support so that they can sit up there and say, I'm not accepting, I'm not going to admit to something that I did not do.
Now,
And
here's the thing. Now, that I agree with 100%. But the system needs to be overhauled.
Of course.
Because without a system overhaul, all you have is a bunch of black men saying, I'm not guilty, and having the book thrown at them when they're actually found guilty.
yeah.
Now in my situation, I can admit I was lucky. I was lucky because I had a fair judge. So the judge heard the situation, heard the circumstances, probably read what I wrote, and probably looked at the charges and was like, probably in her head, this doesn't match. So I ended up with a suspended sentence where I never had a PO, a CO, or anything like that. Stay out of trouble for a certain amount of time, and it's sealed. Okay? But I still had to accept something.
Probation.
What did you have to accept?
I had to accept, something on my record, in order to avoid this whole process.
Wow.
You know,
see that?
so when I see it, it resonates very, very hard with me. So I have a whole lot of conversations with my son that, and I've been having them for a long time,
So
because
what
I'm aware of this stuff.
So what do you tell them?
Listen, I mean, I tell him everything and anything, even situations, that are innocent in terms of things that we did coming up. I have him on edge now about, like, getting on the back of the bus and not paying, you're in school and you do that stupid stuff.
Right.
One day he got on one of those select buses and I was like, never do that, because they have police that come on the bus, ask for the receipts, and if you don't have it, they arrest you. I've seen it happen. And my son, he's taller than me now. I'm 6'2". He's
go right
14
to
years
them and
old.
Yeah.
No one will believe he's 14 if he looks them in the eye and says, I'm 14.
And and that's true, because my son looks older, and my nephew, and it's happened to my nephew where he, was stopped by the cops, and he has his book bag on and he's going to school.
Everything
and
that
then
would say he's a school kid.
Right. And then they didn't believe him when he told them, like, I'm in the 8th, 7th grade or whatever it is. And then and they ask him for ID. He's like, I don't have ID because I'm a child, until they open up his bag and pull out. And when they see the textbooks and they say, oh, this is the textbooks of 8th grade or 7th grade or whatever he was at the time, because he's tall, just like you said. And that this is what, there was a I don't know who actually said it in the movie, where one of the boys was talking about, black boys not being able to be black boys. He was just like, when they say boys will be boys, they're not talking about us.
It's not
they're
us.
talking about, do you feel that black boys get to be black boys?
No, not in America. No way. There's too much.
They don't get to be
There's
children.
too much that they have to be aware of. So it robs them of the innocence of what that age brings. And as a parent, you have to be extra vigilant. When you have young black boys. With girls, there's a little more leeway. And I say little. Because having seen stuff that's happened to
We don't get to
some
be.
of
We don't
these
get to be
women,
little girls either.
well,
Okay,
yeah,
we
because you
don't get to be little
have your
girls
own
either.
set of issues that you
Yeah.
have to, deal with and all of that. But in terms of, that constant threat of always having to be on the lookout. You see police, make sure you respond this way, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. Like, I don't believe other people, and when I say other people, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I don't believe they have to train their children to do that, because they get to curse at the police, they get to have guns, and police are backing away from them when they have guns rather than confronting them. And if ours has anything that even doesn't resemble a gun, they're ready to kill them.
And I with my son and his girlfriend's prom, I had to, be that parent to remind, and that's when kids don't even understand that they don't even have that right. The prom was Memorial Weekend, his girlfriend's prom, and he wanted to rent, all these fancy cars because he's 18 and he already has his license, and he wanted to drive a McLaren or, and all kinds of other stuff. Then it was a Shelby Cobra. Yeah, that's it. And I was just like, you can't do that, because this is Memorial Weekend. There's going to be checkpoints everywhere. You have locks, and you're a young black man. You're going, and I do not want you to be that story on the news that he was just a young man going to his prom and look what happened. You're not going to be that story. I was like, you're going to have to get a driver, a car that has a chauffeur. And I'm sorry, because I'm not taking that chance, that you become that story, that prom night story. And he was furious with me, furious. But as the parent, I have the wisdom to say that that's the call that I have to make, and I have to put my foot down with that. You can't be a boy going to your prom and renting, a car, the fancy car to take your girl. we don't have, like you said,
Yeah.
you don't have that luxury.
We don't get
and
those
and it's
privileges.
unfortunate. And this is where, being a parent comes in, and, but with all of these things, and now that we know better, back then, parents didn't know. That's why they trusted the police officers when the police officers were saying, oh, well, just say this and we'll get you home. And, back then it was just like, okay, if you're in trouble, you go to the cops and trust the cops and things like that. This is 1989. This is not 2019. Well, now we know whatever we can't trust the cops' words. So now when you're seeing all of these parents, actually trusting what the police officers are saying, it's like we really have to be, have a level of sympathy, because at that time, they did kind of trust the police, and if cops are saying, okay, well, just, this is what you need to do. However, one thing I do notice, and I noticed with the movie, and I also noticed back then in 1989, that Yusuf Salam's mother completely separated herself, and she maneuvered through the whole process completely and totally differently than all of the other mothers. She had her Yusuf is innocent shirt, and just her presence and just her demeanor, and even Yusuf himself, when you saw those news footage of them going in and out that courtroom, it was very, very, very different. And then you find out that she's the one, when she came in, she shut down everything. No, he ain't signing anything. There's no, Yusuf didn't sign anything. There's no video confession from Yusuf. She came in, and she knew what she had to do, and she set herself apart from from everybody else.
And that was a display of wisdom versus ignorance. Because she actually had an understanding, and a firm understanding. It wasn't just well, I heard this is how it's supposed to go, so let me try this. She knew how it was supposed to go. So that's why she walked in and she was like, no, it's over. He's not signing anything. This is garbage. This is useless, because he is a minor. He's 15. You're not allowed to question him without an attorney or his parent.
And ain't it a thing when you can maneuver and you can protect your kids from a place of empowerment?
It's a beautiful thing.
Versus cowardice and fear.
Listen.
I don't want to say cowardice. Let's use fear.
Is a rough word.
It's a rough word. You know what I mean? It's like out of fear, and a lot of us maneuver through this world with fear, and fear just, it causes you to have a life that's not really authentic. It causes you to have a life to make very poor decisions. And we saw that fear with Antron McCrae's father. But Yusuf Salam's mother, she came from a place of empowerment, and it was a beautiful
I was watching
thing.
it and I was cheering, because I was feeling like, finally, someone knows what to do. Someone understands what to do and is willing to stand firm. I was upset at the Raymond's father. Because here's Raymond telling him, I know what I'm doing, don't worry, I worked out something, and then when the cop says, put yourself in the mix, that was the moment when he was supposed to say, instead he's like, you mean put yourself in the mix? Like, what's going on? Like, no, not what's going on. No, this has to stop.
But see, that's the thing, when in that same scene, you realize these boys were left to make adult decisions on their own.
Absolutely.
So by the time Raymond Santana's father arrives, he already says, I got it, I had it taken care of, and I made this decision.
I made a deal.
But he didn't know, he's a kid, and he was left to make that decision. The same thing, Antron McCrae's father, made the decision for him, but he roughed up his son, yelled and screamed, you're going to do this, even though the son knew that it wasn't right. Kevin Richardson's mother had left. His sister came in, you know what I mean? But I don't know how old the sister was, and they don't tell you how old the sister was at the time.
And she
but
was
it
trying.
was like, and she did her best. But I tell you, when that scene, when he broke and he was just like, he just want to go home and he begged his sister.
And he begged her to sign the
he
paper.
signed
Just
the
sign
paper and
it.
she didn't want to do it. When I tell you, I cried. I cried and I broke down and everything. I had to pause at that point because it was just like my soul had cried for all of them, for the boys and for the parents and all of the understanding, the mother was sick, and people don't realize that a lot of our kids in the community, they have stuff that they're going through.
course.
And it's like, and people don't even, they got sick parents, and you could be young and you're taking care of sick parents.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes your older siblings step in and they become the surrogate parents, and which is what his sister became.
Right.
But they still are limited in their knowledge and their experience as well. So
Absolutely.
the sister came in, and and I've had that with my older sisters as well. I come from a family of 6 girls, and when my mother working multiple jobs just to make ends meet, my older sisters became my surrogate mother, doing our hair, getting us ready for school and all the. So I understand that dynamic, but
Right.
at the end of the day, where sometimes older sisters, they're the ones that have to go to the parents teacher conferences because the parents are in. That's what happens in our community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But even with all of that, they're still children the same way. They're not parents. They're just older siblings.
right.
And she didn't want to do it, but here you have your little brother begging you 18 hours.
yeah.
They're there.
That
18
was
with
heartbreaking to
no
watch.
food, no sleep, and anything, and they just want to go home. Sign the paper. I just want to go home. And that level of guilt that you carry because you're the one that signed over your brother's life unknowing, because all you want to do is relieve your brother's pain in that moment.
Just
You know what I mean? In that
small
moment when you
gesture.
see it and you forced, you don't have the foresight to sit up there and say, if I don't sign this, this is gonna lead to this and blah blah blah. You don't have that. You don't know that experience.
Yeah.
Just so he knows somebody's working with him. Right?
And it's just it was such a hard, because you have to be sympathetic. And even with the Ken Burns documentary, you didn't see all of you didn't see all of these things and being played out.
Right.
And it's like now we have an understanding, and now we're seeing it, because it's with the boys. They're now they're grown men now, so now they have their input. Raymond
Right.
Santana is the one who reached out to Ava DuVernay, and this is their story told, from their perspective, and you're feeling it. And as an empath, and it was very hard for me to watch because, being an empath, I feel this stuff physically, and I made like 2 or 3 attempts to try to watch it on my own, and I couldn't watch it because I'm literally physically feeling the pain for these people. So I had to ask my husband. I was like, I need you. I want to do a show on this, and I need to be able to see this so that I can do this show. You have to watch this with me. So, and there was pausing and because I'm breaking. When I tell you, I let out a wail, and it wasn't just a cry where tears is welling in your eyes. I wailed, okay? And because it physically hurt me to watch these boys go through this and to see the pain, and they were robbed. And even now, these people just can't own up to and take accountability for what they did and apologize.
Well, they're never gonna do that, because to do that would be to admit that they did something wrong. So what you're gonna get is, I agree with the decision to release them because the DNA cleared them, but they're not innocent of everything. They did do stuff. So basically they're justifying, their methods because they're not actually actually innocent. They're still guilty. And that's the narrative
They
they
said
want to
it, right?
push
Yeah.
because they want to always ensure that they remain squeaky
always a doubt.
clean.
Yeah.
Because we didn't do anything wrong. They were guilty. They just weren't guilty of
Oh my God!
the rape,
I
but
gotta
they were
wrap this.
guilty.
I gotta wrap this up because the time is up, and we may need to do another show to
Yeah.
complete the conversation.
We might need several shows.
Yeah, you know what I mean. And I really want to complete the conversation, but we gotta wrap this up. Yeah.
this is a
So
good show.
this is Sesheta Khepra, the intimacy junkie, and we're wrapping up SoulShare. And I want to thank We Say What They Can't Radio and introduce yourself and just sign out. Give your end.
Okay, this is Mad Scorpion signing out. Thank you for having me.
No, and I hope you come back for the second conversation.
I will be.
next
I'll
week.
be here. I'll be here.
Okay, great.
I'll find my way here, some way, somehow.
Okay, great.
This is so good. This is great. Definitely has to be continued.
And I know you didn't see it, Angie. So hopefully by next week, because we tape next week,
Yeah.
you'll watch it in the meantime.
Yeah, there's a quick reference to a friend of mine who has been railroaded the same way as a young man, and that 19 years old, they still in some ways see you as a child. They don't always try you as an adult, even at 19.
Well, listen, if my color was different,
Okay,
they'd see me as
We gotta wrap this up, people. We gotta wrap it.
Next time.
Next week,
Next week,
we're gonna do
talk
this. All right. And we're done.
Okay.